Part 74. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 731. Chapter 731. No one is more prodigal than Fan Kinjao. Compared to the joyful atmosphere in Prince Pinglei's residence, the atmosphere in the third prince's residence was obviously very gloomy. Bailey Rongs never imagined that the child who was fine yesterday would be gone today. Even though Yunyu had sent him a message in advance, he still couldn't accept it when he saw Fan Swinning's flat belly. Losing two children one after another was a huge blow to Bailey Rongs. What can Bailey Rongs do? Even if he knew in his heart, no matter how grand Yunyu said it, he was actually angry at him for using her as bait to get revenge. Could he really fight with Yunyu over a concubine's child? Of course not. Now that the prince has gained a firm foothold in front of his father, he cannot easily lose the power of any party, especially now that Yunyu is still of great use to him. Bailey Rongs thought about it, called several of his confidants in front of him, and told them to go to Temple Street overnight, use money to buy off the gamblers who wandered around Temple Street all day long, and tell the story of Fan Swinning's child to Prince Pinglei's palace. Fault. Bailey Rongs thought very simply. Since there was no trouble for the prince in this matter, he would simply attack King Pinglei. When King Pinglei's reputation in the main city was completely ruined, no matter what King Pinglei thought, it would be a waste of money for the prince to stay by his side. Thinking of this, Bailey Rongs even asked his confidants to take hundreds more taels of real gold and silver. As long as the thing can be done, he feels that the money is worth it even if he feels sorry for it. But when it comes to being a prodigal, there really is no one better than Fan Kinjao. After all, they are a couple for the same life. How come Fan Kinjao doesn't understand Bailey Rongs' xiaojuju in his heart? After returning to the house, she asked Lanja and Ningtian to take the first step and bribe all the desperados on Temple Street who were looking for money. By the time Bailey Rongs' people arrived again, Lanja and Ningtian were already there. I have gone back home for a midnight snack. Fan Kinjao made a move, but there was no one with 100 taels. Counting on a Temple Street, there were tens of thousands of taels. Those desperados who had already been filled with high prices had never heard of Bailey Rongs' people offering 5 taels. When I was 12 years old, I didn't even raise my eyelids. The confidant had no choice but to go back home and ask Bailey Rongs for his opinion. Although Bailey Rongs couldn't figure out what happened, he continued to open the warehouse and asked his confidants to take out another 200 taels. Unexpectedly, the people on Temple Street asked for 500 taels each. 500 taels per person, the whole street is worth hundreds of thousands of taels. This number would make Bailey Rongs tremble, let alone the confidants of the third prince's mansion. Hundreds of thousands of taels, even if he were torn down, weighed and sold, he still wouldn't be able to get it together. Facing such a shocking price, Bailey Rongs had to give up no matter how hard he wanted to. The news that Aunt Fan of the third prince's palace had given birth to a child in Pinglei Palace spread throughout the main city the next day. However, Fan Kinjao had already bribed those people on Temple Street to speak for Pinglei Palace in advance. In addition, Fan Swinning she was just a little concubine, so she quickly became immersed in this matter. But soon, news spread in the third prince's mansion that the third prince's concubine was ill. The third prince's concubine fell ill like a mountain. I heard that the imperial doctor came to the clinic for treatment that night. In the end, even on the day of concubine Yu's birthday, the third prince's concubine was sick in the palace and could not enter the palace to celebrate concubine Yu's birthday. Miss, there are rumors outside that the third prince fell ill because he blamed himself for Aunt Fan's loss of the child before going to bed, Ningyan told Fan Kinjao the rumors outside. After hearing this, Fan Kinjao just smiled coldly. There is no room for two tigers in one mountain. Although we in Ziliang are polygamists, looking at the world, which wife really wants her husband to love others? Fan Swinning lost her child, and Pan Yulu did well not to set off firecrackers. How could she blame herself? Ningan was confused by what she heard. Then why did the third princess fall ill? There are two tigers in a mountain. If one tiger falls ill, the other tiger will be at ease, of course. Pan Yulu did not fall ill for no reason, and it was probably Fan Swinning who did something small. Lying on the bed and looking at the stars outside the window, Fan Kinjao couldn't help but think of what Fan Swinning asked her that day. Fan Kinjao, do you believe in fate? Fan Kinjao knew that whenever she reversed the outcome of her previous life, divine punishment would surely come. Fan Kinjao still remembers the pain that was like picking out bones and flesh. But I don't know when the so-called divine punishment started to disappear. Even Fan Kinjao couldn't remember how long it had been since he had tasted the taste of divine punishment. Originally, Fan Kinjao was still curious about what went wrong. Now it seems that God's punishment has appeared in another way. Thinking of Fan Swinning's tone and expression that day, Fan Kinjao clenched his hands subconsciously, fearing that Fan Swinning also had memories of his previous life. If this was true, everything would make sense. In the last life, Fan Xixiu had always had smooth sailing, and she was increasingly favored by concubine Yu. Ziwiling and Fan Swinning wanted to take advantage of the trend to curry favor with the third prince, so they used her as a stepping stone to climb up the ladder. But in this life, Fan Kinjao did not give Ziwiling and her daughter another chance. Even Fan Xixiu had been relegated to the altar long ago, but Fan Swinning was still entangled with Bailey wrongs. This can only show that, Fan Swinning knew how inseparable she was with Bailey wrongs in the past, and even ended up becoming the most dazzling woman next to Bailey wrongs. So, does God want Fan Swinning to stop her from continuing to change her destiny? Fan Kinjao curled his lips silently. If this is really the case, then just come over. Who is the one who laughs last? You have to go step by step to find out. The emperor attaches great importance to concubine Yu's birthday every year, and this year is no exception. Early in the morning the next day, the princes and concubines of each palace received the invitation to enter the palace to celebrate concubine Yu's birthday, but Fan Kinjao did not receive it. Just as the princes and concubines were rushing into the palace, Yan Qian, who was beside Queen Zhen 11, came to Hua's house specially, saying that he was visiting the crown prince on behalf of the queen. In fact, he was telling Fan Kinjao that the queen had taken the title of crown princess. He helped Fan Kinjao refuse concubine Yu's birthday party on the grounds of physical discomfort. Of course Queen Zhengzi could not let her daughter-in-law suffer in front of others. Since the third prince and concubine of your concubine Yu Guifei's family can stay out of the palace when she is sick, naturally her little Kinjao can too. They are both daughters-in-law, and no one's family is made of steel. It is perfectly normal to get sick or feel uncomfortable. Want to show off in front of my daughter-in-law? I bother. Why are you so beautiful? Concubine Yu didn't expect that Queen Zhen 11 refused to enter the palace directly on Fan Kinjao's behalf. She was so angry that she didn't sleep much all night last night. She originally wanted to take the opportunity to cause trouble for Fan Kinjao, but was directly defeated by Queen Zhen 11 with her own strength. The power was disturbed. Fan Kinjao really didn't expect that Queen Zhen 11 would go to such an extent for her. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't touched. Yan Qian smiled and said, since the queen has said so, she also asked the crown princess to stay in the palace to recuperate. Now Zhongping, whether in Nanjing or Fengcheng, is still in the main city and has not left. It is estimated that during this period, there are also people in the palace. It won't be too quiet. Fan Kinjao nodded and said, don't worry, Eunuch Yan, I know what to do. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 732. Chapter 732, Backstabbing. After concubine Yu's birthday, the weather became colder day by day. Tu Zhongping from Nanjing and Feng Cheng are still thinking of ways to give advice every day, but the emperor has been pushing back and forth. Now the emperor's temper is getting more and more weird, and no one dares to speculate on the morale of the army without authorization. Unexpectedly, Zhang Pingsheng of Nanjing and Feng Cheng, in desperation, actually found out the whereabouts of the prince. When the prince returned to the palace, they both blocked the palace gate and begged the prince to listen to their advice. When Fan Qinjiao found out about this, his eyes turned cold. The emperor has been ignoring the two Zhongping's memorials. If Bailey Fengming meets the two of them at this time, how will the emperor regard Bailey Fengming? It's just that Bailey Fengming has been living in the East Palace, and his whereabouts cannot be found out by outsiders at all. If no one made suggestions or secretly recommended this matter, how could the two Zhongping appear in front of Bailey Fengming? Thinking about it, Fan Qinjiao thought of Bailey Wrong's. Such a despicable method of stabbing someone in the back is exactly Bailey Wrong's usual style. The prince reacted quickly. He didn't even stop the carriage and just got rid of the two Zhongping. However, the emperor has not expressed his position on this matter until now. It is estimated that there is a gap in his heart towards the Prince Heshuo. The prince was so worried that he didn't know how to vent his worries, so he thought of coming to Hua's house to talk. Hua Yaoding's face was also very gloomy. Now that His Highness the Crown Prince is getting more and more attention in front of the emperor, the third prince is getting more and more panicked. However, no matter how the third prince fights for it, it is reasonable, but he should never take the phoenix with him. Cheng and Nanjing are talking to Zhongping. Behind the two Zhongpings, there are tens of thousands of people in Nanjing and Feng Cheng. If Nanjing and Feng Cheng had not caused uncontrollable things, the two Zhongpings would not have abandoned the people in their cities and stayed in the main city. However, the third prince took the opportunity to make a fuss about this matter, and his intentions were simply sinister. While the emperor responded to the prince, didn't he really dislike the two Zhongping? And once the two Zhongpings are disgusted, the emperor will not care about the affairs of Nanjing and Feng Cheng. If this continues, it will not be those innocent people who will be implicated in the end. The prince had already secretly sent people to investigate this matter, but something like this happened halfway, so the prince could only withdraw his troops first. After all, the emperor is keeping a close eye on it, and the prince can no longer act rashly. Prince Heshuo's side. The more this happened, the more the prince and his party had to hold on, otherwise when Ziliang really fell into the hands of the third prince, that would be the beginning of the real nightmare. Fan Qinjiao sat aside in silence. Firstly, she didn't know much about the specific affairs of Nanjing and Feng Cheng. Secondly, she had been sick in the house during this period and had not interfered with the affairs outside. Her adoptive father and grandfather was already worried, and she didn't want to ask further questions, which made the two old people even more melancholy. What Fan Qinjiao didn't expect was that she had just sent her adoptive father away in the morning, and in the afternoon, the prince who had always worried her adoptive father and her grandfather would be in front of her. Fan Qinjiao. Are all people today so reluctant to talk about it? At this time, Bailey Fengming, who was sitting in the carriage, lightly lifted the curtain with his long fingers. His white robe embroidered with gold thread was spotlessly clean. His fair face became more and more handsome in the sunlight, and his dark eyes were so deep that it was impossible to see them all at a glance. Looking at Fan Qinjiao standing at the door, he smiled faintly, as beautiful as an immortal who walked out of a scroll. The weather is very good today, why don't we go out for a walk? Fan Qinjiao. If my adoptive father knew that he was worried about you, not only was he not worried at all, but instead walked calmly around me in a row, he would definitely chop you into 8 pieces with a big knife. Bailey Fengming could see what Fan Qinjiao was thinking at a glance. I guess Prince Heshuo is already on his way here with a knife. Even if Madame is thinking about her husband's safety, shouldn't she hurry up? Carriage. What else can Fan Qinjiao say besides taking the initiative to step onto the carriage? In the carriage, the fragrance of purple flowers surrounds me. Bailey Fengming took the initiative to pour a cup of tea for Fan Kinjao, then smiled and said, "It seems that madam still cares about her husband." Fan Kinjao's mouth twitched. "You are using me as a cover so blatantly, aren't you just betting that I care about you?" With the emperor's suspicion, he must have secretly sent people to monitor Bailey Fengming's every move. The more Bailey Fengming stayed in the East Palace, the more he seemed to be guilty of guilt. It would be better to leave the palace openly and take him with him. She travels around the mountains and rivers, which is the best weapon to eliminate the emperor's suspicion. Bailey Fengming didn't feel embarrassed when he was exposed. "The best way to get my father to let go of his suspicions is to act like a salted fish." Fan Kinjao. It is really rare to see such a thoughtful person. Are you really not afraid of losing the support of the people? Fan Kinjao looked at the banished man sitting opposite and said that he was lying if he said he was not worried. Bailey Rongs has always been cunning and cunning. This time he incited the two Zhongping to block Bailey Fengming. This not only made the emperor suspicious of Bailey Fengming, but also pushed Bailey Fengming to the forefront. Once Bailey Fengming, what would the two Zhongpings think if they did nothing? What will the people in Nanjing and Fengcheng think? They will be disappointed with the prince, and even reject the prince's existence. This is why everyone hopes to win the hearts and minds of the people. Bailey Fengming saw that the tea in front of Fan Kinjao was a little cold, so he changed the teacup in front of her to his own, and took another teacup to get some good tea. The hearts of the people of the two cities have been lost. You can earn it back, but if you really make your father jealous because of this, all the efforts you and I have made will be in vain. If you gain something, you will lose it. Since ancient times, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Everyone knows the saying, but there are very few people who can actually do it. Living in this world, who can say that we should accept the good things soon? But Bailey Fengming did it, calmly between gaining and giving up. But just when Fan Kinjao was about to sigh and feel ashamed, Bailey Fengming suddenly smiled. "Ah! Why are you laughing?" "Whatever you are thinking, I am laughing at." Fan Kinjao frowned. "Did I think wrong?" Bailey Fengming nodded seriously this time. "I'm really not that noble." "Then you are still so calm." "Anyway, with my wife here, no matter how hard it is, I won't starve to death on the streets with my help." Fan Kinjao. "You are eating soft food and you are making sense." What happened in Nanjing and Fengcheng? Fan Kinjao thought about what the second prince and concubine said last time, and always felt that something was not right about what happened in those two cities. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 733. Chapter 733. Isn't that our young lady? Bailey Fengming never concealed anything from Fan Kinjao. He just told Fan Kinjao all the things that Lin Yi had secretly investigated some time ago. Nanjing and Fengcheng are not big cities, and their systems are not stricter than other big cities. However, due to their close proximity to the main city, the two cities can be considered peaceful. Since the founding of Ziliang, except for some robberies, things didn't make much of a fuss. But just recently, children have been missing between the two cities. The people in Nanjing who first reported to the government, Lin Yi, checked the files of Nanjing County government. It clearly stated that two drunk men disappeared out of thin air on the street. The person they saw at that time was a watchman, but the strange thing is that just before the watchman died on the street the same night he reported the crime. Fan Kinjao frowned. But have you checked the details of the watchman? Does he have any enemies? Bailey Fengming shook his head. Lin Yuan secretly inquired about the details of the watchman in Nanjing, but he had no clue. He didn't even find out where the watchman's family lived or who else was in his family. This is very strange. Nanjing is not too big. Normally, it is not difficult to find out about someone. Especially for people like this who have had trouble, some clues can be found almost quickly. Of course, it all makes sense if someone deliberately hid everything. But what Fan Kinjao couldn't figure out was that for an ordinary reporter, even if the murderer wanted to hide, he should have killed and silenced him that night, instead of waiting until the watchman called the police and then letting him disappear. Moreover, the smaller the place, the more complicated the relationship between people. There are many people living on the street who are related to each other. This is definitely not something that can be concealed simply by killing one person. Everything. Moreover, people in Nanjing are still disappearing. Since the murderer is not afraid of making things worse, why does he have to hide a little watchman? Bailey Fengming sighed, it would be okay if it was just a simple concealment. Lin Yi also found out that shortly after the accident in Nanjing, people in Fengcheng also disappeared one after another, and the person who reported the case in the Fengcheng County government file the portrait is the watchman who reported the crime in Nanjing. Fan Kinjao was so shocked that he dropped the teacup in his hand. Even in broad daylight, I was broken into a cold sweat. Bailey Fengming, with quick eyes and hands, caught the teacup and gently put it back on the low table. Lin Yi just found out some things. 2 Zhongping from Nanjing and Fengcheng blocked in front of my carriage. I originally thought let Lin Yi find out some clues and come back, now we can only put this matter aside for the time being. Fan Kinjao looked at Bailey Fengming, do you really believe in ghosts? Bailey Fengming was stunned for a moment, and then smiled. He must have been really frightened, and even the ghosts came out. If this matter is really caused by ghosts, it might be easier to handle. Bailey Fengming touched Fan Kinjao's hair. Fan Kinjao nodded, it was true. Ghosts kill people either for revenge or to kill innocent people indiscriminately. No matter what the reason is, at least the matter will be solved easily. But Fan Kinjao never believed in ghosts and gods. If there really is a ghost, she will not be reborn, but will directly become a ghost and seek Bailey Rong's life. I heard that my father summoned people from Dali Temple to enter the palace yesterday. I think it was because of the matter of Fengcheng and Nanjing. However, after the 2 Zhongping made such a fuss, my father's side will inevitably become suspicious, so the matter can only be postponed for the time being. Yeah, Bailey Fengming sighed almost helplessly. Fan Kinjao nodded, feeling even more disgusted with Bailey Rongs. Bailey Rongs is still the same as in the previous life, doing whatever it takes to achieve his own interests. In the previous life, in order to gain the emperor's trust, he would not hesitate to forge evidence to slander the officials of the dynasty and push those innocent officials to the guillotine. In this life, he wants to gain the emperor's trust. For the emperor to doubt Bailey Fengming, what's so strange about sacrificing the people of 2 cities? But the more this happens, the less she can let Bailey Rongs get what he wants. The cold fingers clenched tightly, and the fingertips dug into the palm of her hand due to force. Suddenly, the slender 5 fingers wrapped her little hand. Fan Kinjao came back to his senses and looked at Bailey Fengming's gentle eyebrows. Soft, soft, even though she didn't say a word, it was worth 1,000 words. In an instant, Fan Kinjao's hand also became warm. The carriage that was running smoothly stopped on the street. When Fan Kinjao followed Bailey Fengming out of the carriage, the street was still bustling with people, and was not affected by Nanjing and Fengcheng. It was obvious that the court was keeping this matter airtight. Since Bailey Fengming wanted to make people feel like he was lying down, he had to assume a lying down posture. Seeing that the weather was nice today, he took Fan Kinjao and walked from house to house. Of course Fan Kinjao understood what Bailey Fengming was thinking, and it was really difficult to relax for a day, so he simply became a tool man. Isn't it just shopping? Shopping around. The main city is already big, and Bailey Fengming and Fan Kinjao are not people who like to show off. Even if they are walking on the bustling streets, no people can recognize them, except for Bailey Fengming's face. His face is really eye-catching, attracting people's attention everywhere. It was Peng Jing who was watching the wind at the door of his house. He first saw Bailey Fengming in the crowd, and he wondered, how much thick incense did this person have to burn in his previous life to be rewarded by God with such a face in this life? If he had a face like this, what else would he have to struggle for? It would be important to quickly find a rich family to be his son-in-law. Just looking at it, Peng Jing felt that something was wrong. Especially when he saw Fan Qinjiao's face, Peng Jing was shocked. Isn't that his young lady? And a man who can get his own lady to accompany him when shopping. It seems that there is only the current crown prince, right? When Yu Luo went out, she saw Peng Wei stuck in place like a wooden stake. Did you get struck by lightning? Peng Jing came to his senses and quickly pulled Yu Luo and said, "Look, is that our young lady?" Yu Luo smiled at a glance, "Wasn't it? That was their young lady." When she saw the man following the young lady, she suddenly realized, "It's good to go out for a walk. Our young lady is too tired, I hope the lady can relax more." Ever since she followed the young lady, she has never seen her relaxed. Looking at the young ladies from other families in the main city, at her age, which one is not carefree? But look at her young lady. Peng Jing thought about it. "I was just wondering if I should invite the lady over for a cup of tea." Yu Luo nodded, "It's not impossible." Peng Jing left as soon as he said it, and walked in the direction of Fan Qinjiao and Bailey Fengming with long strides. Today's Qingnanzai has long been known to everyone in the main city, and there are even more people who want to fawn over Qingnanzai all day long in order to get new products every season. Now I saw Peng Jing walking onto the street in person, obviously going to call for help. Both the people passing by and the vendors doing business around were looking at him eagerly, wondering who had such a big face and could do so. Let the people of Qingnanzai be so proactive. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 734. Chapter 734. The love engraved in the bones. Mu Yan, who was in the store, looked at Yu Luo at the door and walked out curiously. As a result, when she went out, she happened to see Peng Jing walking towards the third sister and His Royal Highness. Mu Yan reacted quickly. She quickly pulled Yu Luo and said, "Hurry up and call Peng Jing over." Yu Luo was stunned. Peng Jing just wants to invite the young lady and His Royal Highness to come in and have a rest. Mu Yan paused and said, "Third sister and His Royal Highness rarely go out together, so how can they like to be recognized?" Yu Luo was suddenly startled, as if this was what happened. Looking at the surrounding shops and people, she saw that everyone was following Peng Jing. Yu Luo quickly picked up her skirt and ran towards Peng Jing, pulling Peng Jing to tell what Miss Mu Yan had just said. "Read it again." Peng Jing nodded belatedly, but nodding at this time was of no use. As he walked along, everyone's eyes on the whole street were focused on him. If he just said back at this time, wouldn't it be even more suspicious if the government was in charge? Yu Luo and Peng Jing were struggling when they saw a carriage parked beside them. As the carriage door was opened, Zhou Renjian stepped out of the carriage and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Of course he came to visit Mu Yan, but when he saw Yu Luo and Peng Jing standing on the street, he thought something had happened. Yu Luo and Peng Jing stopped worrying the moment they saw Zhou Renjian. Especially Peng Jing, they shouted at the top of their lungs, "The young master of the Zhou family is here. Please come in." The voice was so loud that it was deafening. Zhou Renjian was so frightened that he took a step back, feeling that the smile on Peng Jing's face was so charming. When the people around him saw it, they were inevitably a little disappointed and looked away one after another. Since the news of the engagement between the Zhou family and the Hua family came out, the young master of the Zhou family will come over every now and then to stay for a day. He looks so sticky, as if he is afraid that his unmarried daughter-in-law will disappear out of thin air. Yuoluo and Peng Jing saw that this method worked, and they became even more enthusiastic about Zhou Renjian. Especially Peng Jing, who took Zhou Renjian's arm and walked towards Qingnanzai. It's like we haven't seen each other for 3 years. The young master of the Zhou family doesn't know, but we all miss you so much. Zhou Renjian. It is easier to penetrate people and cut them down. Mu Yan, who was standing at the door of Qingnanzai, looked at this scene. If she hadn't been naturally introverted, she would have laughed like crazy. Fortunately, the third sister and His Royal Highness were not affected. Fan Qinjiao had actually noticed the commotion behind her a long time ago. Unexpectedly, Mu Yan had really grown up a lot and was now calm and considerate of the overall situation. However, now that Zhou Ren was in charge, she did not look back and followed by Yan. Li Fengming continued to walk forward. It was also seen that Niduan's Bei Li Fengming had long been seen. Seeing that Fan Qinjiao didn't say anything, he chose to ignore it. A burst of fragrance comes to your face, mixed with the cool breeze of late autumn. Fan Qinjiao looked up and saw a stall selling pan-fried crispy pork in the distance. I guess it tastes good, and many people are queuing up near the stall. Fan Qinjiao was just thinking about whether to spend some time and wait, or to leave directly. But before she could think about it, she saw a familiar figure walking towards the small stall. The white robe on that table stood out among the crowd, and the long figure and handsome face in the sun were even more dazzling. But such a person who is out of tune with the stall is now standing peacefully among the crowd, waiting for the next pot of golden and crispy pork. Such a visually conflicting scene, not to mention that Fan Qinjiao looked awkward. Even the common people who were also queuing up to buy shortcut pork quietly cast their eyes on the white robe. However, the owner of the white robe didn't have any consciousness at all, and just lined up calmly. The dignified prince of a country, queuing up to buy short crispy pork. It's really refreshing. When the steaming crispy pork was finally handed to Fan Qinjiao's hands, Fan Qinjiao really felt like he was the center of attention. However, the crispy pork was really delicious, crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, marinated and delicious. Just at this moment, another small cart selling sweet corn came slowly from a distance. Fan Qinjiao subconsciously thought that the last time he ate corn, he seemed to be shopping with his mother. At that time, her mother had not remarried, and she didn't want to think that everything would have become a memory in the blink of an eye. Bei Li Fengming looked at someone who was fascinated by the corn, and smiled slightly, knowing that she might not really miss the taste of corn, but she still turned around and walked towards the cart selling corn. If the people's eyes on Fan Qinjiao just now were full of admiration, then now they are really filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred. Even the shopkeepers of many shops around him are quietly snooping around. After all, he is so handsome and extraordinary. A warm and caring son-in-law is not someone you bump into every day. When Fan Qinjiao came to his senses, he originally wanted to call out to Bei Li Fengming, but after thinking about it, he decided to forget it. It seems like everything is calm when we go out today, but who knows how many pairs of eyes are hidden behind it. Since we are all out, we might as well enjoy the day like ordinary people. Thinking like this, Fan Qinjiao felt a lot more relaxed. At this moment, Bei Li Fengming came back with steaming corn, and Fan Qinjiao took a bite of it. Bei Li Fengming looked at the freshly baked tooth marks on the corn and laughed dumbly. He reached out and wiped the corn kernels stuck to the corners of Fan Qinjiao's lips and said softly, "What else do you want to eat?" There are really a lot of snacks on this street, but Fan Qinjiao is not very good at eating them. Basically, he just tastes a bite and hands it to Bei Li Fengming. When the two of them walk down, Bei Li Fengming's the hands are full of things. It happened that there was a restaurant behind the two of them, and Fan Qinjiao asked, "Are you tired?" Bei Li Fengming smiled faintly, "Madam, I haven't eaten well, how dare I say I'm tired?" Fan Qinjiao. "Shut up." This restaurant is not as famous as other restaurants in the main city, but the environment inside is also elegant. At this time, it was already past dinner time. When Fan Qinjiao and Bailey Fengming came in, there were not many diners in the lobby. However, the waiter saw that Fan Qinjiao and Bailey Fengming were both well dressed, so people were invited to the second floor. Unexpectedly, as soon as he reached the second floor, he saw Bailey Lingyu sitting by the window. Bailey Lingyu didn't expect to meet Fan Qinjiao and brother Huang here, so she quickly stood up and said hello. What a coincidence. Fan Qinjiao followed Bailey Fengming and walked over, opening his mouth and saying, 5. Unexpectedly, before he finished speaking, he saw a woman sitting next to Bailey Lingyu. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 735. Chapter 735. She is indeed a beauty. Fan Qinjiao looked around and saw that the woman sitting on the chair was a woman of similar age to her. She was 14 or 15 years old, so young that she could squeeze water out of her mouth. She was wearing a peach-pink dress that reflected her fair face. She is even more delicate, with thin eyebrows, big eyes, and a cherry mouth. She really has a look that pleases men. This woman is really beautiful, even Fan Qinjiao secretly praises her in his heart. Then, what, these are my brother and sister-in-law. Bailey Lingyu hurriedly explained to the woman, as if she was afraid that the woman would misunderstand something. But she just called you Wu, wasn't your name Lingyu? The woman blinked her big eyes and asked curiously. Bailey Lingyu racked her brains. Oh, that's because I am the fifth eldest child in my family. Whether it's the court or the palace, who doesn't know that the fifth prince is a monkey? Even the emperor dares to choke when he plays with a hammer. When has he ever been so cautious? Fan Qinjiao looked at the fifth prince scratching his head. What else didn't he understand? I guess the woman in front of me is the one who made the fifth prince fall in unrequited love and was dumped in the legend. Thinking of this, Fan Qinjiao said, "Fifth brother, this is..." Hearing this, Bailey Lingyu was so excited that she almost knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Fan Qinjiao. She was indeed her sister-in-law, and she was reliable at critical moments. Her surname is Zhao and her name is Yi. I rescued her in Subay. Later, I heard that she was coming to the main city to find her relatives, so I brought her back to the main city. Fan Qinjiao raised his eyebrows. He spoke so implicitly and still looked for relatives. I'm afraid the fifth prince was seriously poisoned. Bailey Lingyu didn't have the slightest bit of self-consciousness. She watched Zhao Yi introduce Fan Qinjiao and Bailey Fengming, but she obviously omitted a lot. This is my fourth brother, and this is my fourth sister-in-law. Bailey Fengming. I'm afraid I won't be able to have this younger brother again. Fan Qinjiao almost stopped laughing when he saw Bailey Fengming's face turn dark. The little girl Zhao Yi has met Lingyu's brother and sister-in-law. Zhao Yi stood up slowly and saluted Yingying. Her slim and graceful appearance could be said to be as soft as water. Bailey Fengming didn't want to speak, but Bailey Lingyu couldn't help but wink with all his strength, so he could only look at Zhao Yi and said, "Get up, there's no need to be so reserved." It is true that Bailey Fengming has been dormant, but since he grew up in the palace, the pride and dignity in him are clearly visible. Even if the emperor is partial, as the prince, he is still regarded as the crown prince by the court since he was a child. Education, this kind of thing is engraved in the bones and cannot be changed at all. Zhao Yi raised her head following the sound, and then looked at Bailey Fengming carefully. The result was this glance, and I couldn't recover from it for a long time. Bailey Lingyu thought she was frightened, so she quickly smiled and said, "My fourth brother is like this on weekdays, but he is still a very nice person. Don't be afraid. You will know when you get familiar with him." When Zhao Yi came back to her senses, she quickly lowered her head, nodded gently and said, "I'm fine." Bailey Lingyu breathed a sigh of relief. After sitting down, She looked at Bailey Fengming and Fan Qinjiao again. The expulsion order in her eyes was not too obvious. It was clearly on her face. You two quickly drink tea. Let's go have a meal. The scenery there is nice, much better than here. As can be imagined, Bailey Fengming's face turned a lot darker. Of course Fan Qinjiao would not be so blind as to be an eyesore here. He smiled and said, let's have a cup of tea and have a rest. We won't disturb fifth brother and Miss Zhao's meal. Bai Li Lingyu looks like a royal sister-in-law and is very interesting. I will treat you to dinner someday. Bailey Fengming didn't expect that his brother, who he loved so much, would one day be so jealous, but he didn't really mean to stay, so he turned around and left with Fan Qinjiao. Since we have met, why don't we sit down together? Zhao Yi suddenly asked to stay, but seemed to feel a little abrupt again, looked at Bai Li Lingyu and said, I just don't want you to alienate your brother and sister-in-law because of me. This is my fault. The beauty's big eyes flashed with grievance and innocence, which made Bailey Lingyu feel numb. What else could Bailey Lingyu say? It's not as serious as you think. Year, don't cry. It really has nothing to do with you. It's okay. Just let my fourth brother and sister-in-law stay. After hearing this, Zhao Yi held back the tears in her eyes and nodded gently. Bailey Lingyu raised her head and looked at Bailey Fengming and Fan Qinjiao, fourth brother and fourth sister-in-law, please come back. Bailey Fengming. Even if he is a biological brother, it is time to let go of his skin. Bailey Lingyu trembled when she saw Bailey Fengming, and her hair stood on end. His fourth brother does not have a bluffing face, nor does he have an easygoing temper, but he has seen too many sinister methods. He still remembers that what he hated most when he was a child was writing, but now he is, apart from the imperial brother, he is the best at writing among all the princes. It's not that he works too hard, it's that his royal brother's methods are simply outrageous. Recalling the tragic past, Bailey Lingyu wanted to wipe away a handful of bitter tears on the spot. Fan Qinjiao also didn't expect Bailey Fengming to react so strongly to Zhao Yi, but since the fifth prince has spoken, she still has to give him face. In this case, I can only disturb him. Zhao Yi smiled and said, don't bother me, there just happen to be more people and it's more lively. Fan Qinjiao smiled and sat with Bailey Fengming opposite Bailey Lingyu and Zhao Yi. While the food was being served, Bailey Lingyu couldn't help complaining to Bailey Fengming, Emperor, fourth brother, the military and horse department is really not a place for people to lead. I don't know how many pairs of eyes are staring at me all day long. Bailey Fengming picked up the teapot, poured a cup of tea and put it in front of Fan Qinjiao, then said softly, the more this happens, the more it means there is something inside that I don't want you to see. Why don't you check it carefully when I have time? No need for the moment. As long as you are in the military and horse division, those people will be extremely wary. Only by staying still can you prevent others from catching you. Wait until the people in the military and horse division gradually adapt to your presence. It's not too late to investigate further at that time. Bailey Lingyu nodded, but by the way, I heard that my father, the emperor, talked to the commander of the military and horse department today. Now the military and horse department is spreading the news about Nanjing and Fengcheng. I am afraid that it will be handed over to the military and horse department investigated. Bailey Fengming said, probably not. Bai Li Lingyu frowned, but I did see the commander entering the palace today. Bailey Fengming remained silent and did not answer. Instead, he picked up a piece of the sweet-scented Osmanthus cake on the table and gently placed it on Fan Qinjiao's plate. It looks like it's done well. Try it and see if you like it. I'll pack some to take back when I leave. Bell Lingyu. Just say that neglect is neglect. Do you treat him as a human being? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 736. Chapter 736 White Lotus Original Lotus. Of course, Fan Qinjiao knew the reason why Bailey Fengming ignored the fifth prince. Nowadays, everyone in Fengcheng and Nanjing is staring at the hotcakes. Nowadays, especially outside in front of outsiders, it is natural to say less and make fewer mistakes. Bailey Lingyu still looked like she had indigestion. She was not at all wary of Zhao Yi beside her. Looking at Zhao Yi again, she lowered her head and ate the food in front of her obediently. Her soft and weak look did not seem like she was stealing. Listen to them. Fan Qinjiao thought for a moment and then said, Nanjing and Fengcheng are not trivial matters. The emperor has expressed his own plans and has his own plans. His heart is unpredictable and unfathomable. Those of us who are watching from the other side should just wait and see what happens. Hearing this, Bai Li Lingyu finally understood that the emperor was jealous of Zhao Yi, but he felt it was completely unnecessary. He trusted Zhao Yi, and she simply couldn't understand it at all. Thinking of this, Bailey Lingyu wanted to explain to the emperor fourth brother, actually. Bailey Fengming put down the teacup in his hand without hesitation and interrupted Bailey Lingyu's words, seeing that you are so free, why not play a game of chess? Bell Lingyu. Ever since I was little, I have never won a game of chess with him. Playing chess with others is called playing chess with brother Huang is called looking for abuse. The image of being abused to the point of being unable to fight back is still vivid in her mind, and the well-behaved Bailey Lingyu shut her mouth in an instant. As Bailey Lingyu fell silent, it finally became quiet. Zhao Yi suddenly asked, I wonder where fourth brother is employed. No one expected that Zhao Yi would suddenly speak. Even Fan Qinjiao was stunned for a moment. Zhao Yi seemed to feel that she had said something wrong, and quickly waved her hands and shook her head. I just felt that I didn't understand what the fourth brother said to Lingyu just now, so I was curious and wanted to ask. Before he finished speaking, he lowered his head. Such a simple and unsophisticated look was enough to make a man feel pity. Seeing this, Bailey Lingyu could only look at her imperial brother pleadingly. Bailey Fengming didn't give Bailey Lingyu any trouble this time. She Shiren said, I have nothing to do for now. If I really want to be busy with something, then I would be busy being a son-in-law. Bell Lingyu. Fan Qinjiao. Zhao Yi probably didn't expect to get such an answer. After a long while, she finally said, there used to be a son-in-law in our village, but looking at the way my fourth brother dressed and behaved, he didn't look like a son-in-law. Bailey Fengming smiled faintly, it's because the future wife is rich that I dress decently. Fan Qinjiao really didn't know what to say, so she could only turn her head and look at Bailey Fengming and smile awkwardly. She couldn't afford to have His Majesty the Crown Prince as her son-in-law. Bailey Fengming took Fan Qinjiao's hand and smiled as warmly as jade, although this marriage is between my parents and my mother, the time I spent with my wife made me feel deeply comfortable. If it were really me, it's wrong, madam, you can tell me, I just hope she won't get tired of me. Fan Qinjiao smiled and gritted his teeth, what if you really get bored? Bailey Fengming thought for a moment with a serious look on his face, then we have to stalk him and fight him hard. Fan Qinjiao. Although this was not the case at all, her marriage to him was decided by the emperor and the empress, so even if she wanted to refute, she would be speechless. Sure enough, he is still the cunning fox and the same sinister person. Bai Li Lingyu covered her face, really blind brother, you have a sense of superiority when you cut in the door upside down. If our ancestors hear this, I'm afraid the coffin boards buried deep in the ground will not be able to cover it. Is this really true? Zhao Yi asked Bailey Lingyu beside her. She really didn't see that such a high-quality man could be a son-in-law. So that's what happened. Of course Bailey Lingyu couldn't dismantle her imperial brother, and thinking about the days when the emperor's brother was in the palace, it was really the emperor's sister-in-law who was running around the main city alone to make arrangements. After careful calculation, she the imperial brother has embarked on the journey of eating soft rice. Zhao Yi's eyes flashed with disappointment, but she quickly returned to her original inexperienced look. At this moment, the waiter came up with a tray. One after another exquisite dishes were placed on the table, and as far as the eye could see, there was a large table. At this time, even Fan Kinjao was a little surprised. The monthly salary of the military and horse division is very high. Judging from the location and decoration of this restaurant, the prices of the dishes there should be quite high. Bailey Lingyu smiled and said, I have saved some small money before. Although it is not as good as my fourth sister-in-law, it is still enough for a few meals. Besides, Yi has lived a hard life in the countryside for too long. I don't want her to come to the Lord. The city continues to suffer. Oh, I am here to please the beauty. Of course, Fan Kinjao wouldn't say anything about things like love. He sat across from Bailey Fengming and drank tea quietly, watching Bailey Lingyu pick up the vegetables with chopsticks. To Zhao Yi just lowered her head and ate, not feeling much about Bailey Lingyu's actions at all. She seemed to have been used to being taken care of by Bailey Lingyu. Suddenly, a crystal shrimp dumpling was placed on Fan Kinjao's plate. Would you like to try it and see if it tastes good? Fan Kinjao was stunned. She did like to eat shrimp dumplings, but she had never said it before. She never thought that it was just a few meals with Bailey Fengming, and he just remembered it. Seeing this, Bailey Lingyu also said, Sister-in-law fourth, the shrimp dumplings here are very famous. It would be a pity if you missed it since you are here. Hearing this, Fan Kinjao tentatively picked up the chopsticks and tasted it. The skin was thin, the filling was big, and the shrimps were delicious. It really tastes good. Seeing this, Bailey Fengming picked up another shrimp dumpling and handed it to Fan Kinjao's mouth. Eat more if you like it. Fan Kinjao wanted to say no, but she saw a small hand pushing the steamer filled with shrimp dumplings in front of her. She looked up and saw Zhao Yi's innocent and pure face. Since fourth sister-in-law likes to eat, I give it to fourth sister-in-law unexpectedly. Fourth sister-in-law has never even eaten the shrimp dumplings. Here are all the rich people in the main city so frugal. This is what I said. If it weren't for Zhao Yi's blinking innocent eyes, Fan Kinjao would really think that these words were mocking her. No matter who owns the money, it is not brought by the strong wind. It belongs to the province. Only in this way can the money be used wisely, right? Miss Zhao, right? Fan Kinjao looked at Zhao Yi with a half-smile. Whether it was intentional or not, there was no need for her to give up anything. Zhao Yi seemed not to understand the meaning of these words at all. She turned to look at Bailey Fengming and said, the families in our village who can find a son-in-law are all very generous. I didn't expect that it would be different after entering the main city. Okay, I really feel wronged by fourth brother. If fourth brother changes his mind one day, I wouldn't mind helping fourth brother go to our village to ask. This is even more interesting to hear. It's just an above-board attempt to sow discord. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 737. Chapter 737. How my husband is none of your business. Whether it was the last life or this life, Fan Kinjao had never met a woman like Zhao Yi. She obviously had her own little thoughts, but she had to look innocent and pretend to speak without thinking. After all, if such a woman wants to please a man, it is okay, but if she is really thrown into a pile of women, she will probably be swallowed up to the bone. Bailey Fengming didn't show any anger, he just smiled and said, I only like my wife. Zhao Yi was stunned for a moment, then murmured to herself, what's the point of living a life of being pressed down by others? It's said that you don't have to worry about food and drink, but what's the difference between you and a prisoner? Yi, even Bai Li Lingyu couldn't stand hearing these words. Zhao Yi was stunned by Li Lingyu's shouting, and then she lowered her head and whispered, as if she had been greatly wronged, I didn't mean anything else, I just said those words because I felt sorry for my fourth brother. If fourth brother minds, I'll just leave it alone. As soon as I finished speaking, tears fell down. Li Lingyu panicked all of a sudden, that's not what I meant. Don't cry. The relationship between my fourth brother and my fourth sister-in-law has always been very good. I also know that you are worried about my fourth brother, but don't worry. My sister-in-law actually loves my fourth brother very much. Zhao Yi lowered her head and said nothing, crying even harder. Li Lingyu was stunned and could only look at Fan Qinjiao for help, sister-in-law of the emperor, help. Fan Qinjiao glanced at Zhao Yi. She didn't know how to make people happy, but she still had many ways to make people stop crying. I've always heard that Miss Zhao is simple-minded, but I didn't expect that she is actually a philanthropic person. Now she is just a talented person. When she saw my husband, she was so concerned and cried like this. What I know is that Miss Zhao is kind-hearted, but what I don't know is that Miss Zhao is just attracted to my husband. Fan Qinjiao was still smiling when he spoke, but every word was poking Zhao Yi's heart. Fan Qinjiao has no control over what kind of woman Li Lingyu likes. But if someone takes advantage of Li Lingyu and has any thoughts that they shouldn't have, Fan Qinjiao must take care of it. Zhao Yi never expected that Fan Qinjiao would speak so directly. She actually froze on the spot, with her head and face lowered. She was not really crying, nor was she even crying. Li Lingyu didn't know much about love affairs between men and women, but after Fan Qinjiao's reminder, he seemed to be wondering what was wrong. From the time she met Zhao Yi always said that she was engaged to be engaged. Even if the engaged husband abandoned her in the village and ignored her, she still loved her engaged husband wholeheartedly. It is precisely for this reason that Li Lingyu hid her identity, because she was afraid of scaring such an innocent little girl. But now, Zhao Yi, who has always been thinking about her engaged husband, actually cares about his imperial brother for no reason. If Li Lingyu still can't figure it out, then it's not that she doesn't understand men and women, but that she's stupid. Zhao Yi seemed to notice Li Lingyu's silence and quietly pulled his sleeve. In the past, as long as she took the initiative, Li Lingyu would always respond to her requests, but now, Li Lingyu remains silent without any expression. He likes Zhao Yi, but in terms of closeness, apart from the queen, no one can compare to Li Fengming and Fan Qinjiao. One is the imperial brother who has loved him since childhood, and the other is the imperial sister-in-law whom he admires. So in comparison, of course he believed in the emperor's brother and his wife more. I wonder why I looked familiar as soon as I went upstairs. A woman chuckled suddenly from behind. Fan Qinjiao turned around and saw the 8th prince's concubine and several ladies walking over. Judging from the appearance and clothing of those ladies, they should all be the 8th prince's concubine's natal family. In order to show their generosity and kindness, the Ziliang royal family has always treated their daughters-in-law leniently. Except for concubines, all the wives who are related to the royal family can interact with their natal family after marrying. There is no need to be like other countries, only relatives can only meet on special occasions. Since the 8th prince was sent to the south, the 8th prince's concubine has been completely free. She spends her days sitting in the house with her husband's family, or going out for a walk on days when the weather is nice. The 8th princess did not expect to meet the crown princess here, and she was extremely enthusiastic. However, just when she was about to say hello, she saw Fan Qinjiao gently shaking his head at her. 8th princess. What's the situation? Fan Qinjiao frowned as she looked at the 8th prince. Originally, she didn't think it was necessary for the 5th prince to hide his royal status from Zhao Yi, but now after meeting Zhao Yi, she felt that the 5th prince's IQ was finally online for once. A woman like Zhao Yi definitely doesn't look so innocent. Zhao Yi saw that the eighth prince's concubine suddenly stopped talking, so she took the opportunity to ask Bai Li Lingyu, "Who is this?" Bai Li Lingyu's face was stiff and she didn't know how to answer. The ladies who were following the eighth prince concubine were all the eighth prince concubine's sisters-in-law. As they had never been to the palace and could not possibly know the prince and crown princess. They could only look at the eighth prince concubine and ask, "These people. Do you know the eighth princess? The eighth princess is so smart." She saw an Iduan in it, so she shook her head and said, "I thought I had met an old friend, but I didn't expect that I was dazzled and made a mistake." After hearing this, the smiles on Fan Qingjiao's and others' faces disappeared when the ladies heard this. Since they were not friends of the eighth prince, there was no need for them to be polite. "I thought I had met someone special, but it turns out I had the wrong person. Since we recognized the wrong person, let's leave. There is no need to waste time on unnecessary people." "That's right, since you don't know the eighth prince concubine, why don't you quickly apologize to her and wait for the eighth prince consort to take the initiative to say it out? Are you planning to take the opportunity to build a relationship?" The eighth prince's concubine's mother's family is not considered a wealthy family in the main city, but it is also a minister holding an important position in the court. Now these ladies, I think they were all young ladies who were raised by small families in the past, and now they are married to the brothers of the eighth prince's mother's family, are all a bit arrogant. The eighth princess looked at the faces of her sisters-in-law who were faster than flipping through a book, and hurriedly pulled a few of them away. She was really afraid that she would say something treacherous again. How would she face the princess again? Fan Qingjiao looked at the busy eighth prince and concubine, smiled and said nothing. In order to avoid suspicion, the eighth princess deliberately chose a place far away from Fan Qingjiao's table, but her sisters-in-law were never peaceful and kept praising her at the top of their voices. On normal days, the eighth prince's concubine would naturally be used to this kind of atmosphere of being admired by the stars. But now, knowing that the crown princess was sitting not far away and listening, the praises of the sisters-in-law about their virtues, and extraordinary intelligence made her feel ashamed. Compared to the crown princess, what does she mean? The eighth prince's concubine still has this kind of self-awareness. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 738. Chapter 738. The prince's childhood as a top student. Compared to the liveliness of the eighth prince's side, Fan Qingjiao's side was obviously much more restrained. Bailey Fengming didn't have much contact with the eighth prince's concubine before, but now he saw from the corner of his eye that the eighth prince's concubine was sitting on a round stool and shivering when she was praised by several sisters-in-law, so she said with a smile, "I didn't expect that old with such an unruly temperament, he can find such an interesting wife." Fan Qingjiao also smiled and said, "Indeed, that's why I often heard the eighth prince's concubine complain before. However, the eighth prince's concubine is a good person. She dislikes her even if she dislikes her. She always lives with the eighth prince sincerely." Bailey Fengming nodded in agreement. It can be considered a fool's blessing. Fan Qingjiao. Your disgusted face shouldn't be too obvious, okay? Bailey Lingyu has been practicing martial arts since she was a child and has always had an excellent ear. Now that she heard the words of the emperor's brother and his wife, she felt that what her emperor's brother said was relatively conservative. Although these brothers are not the same mother-in-law, they have all grown up in the prince's care. At that time, the emperor's brother was not the prince, but just the fourth emperor's brother. As a royal heir, it seems that he was born with a silver spoon, but in fact, he has to bear what others can't imagine. Children from wealthy families usually don't start school until they are 5 years old, but the princes in the palace have to go to school when they are more than 3 years old. Went to the study room to study. I still remember that at that time, they were all little carrot heads. They couldn't even sit still. They had no intention to study. They hung out for a year and waited for the school entrance examination in the second year without even thinking about it. Thinking about it, that is really clear water of Manjianghong. The fifth prince remembered that his father was so angry that he came to the upper study room in the morning and personally brought people over to reward them with boards. The buttocks of 3 or 4-year-old children were all opened. The fifth prince felt extremely sour when he thought about it. Among all the princes, only his fourth brother was not beaten. The reason is very simple, everyone has answered it. The most perverted thing is that he is also the first person in history to get full marks in the Enlightenment examination. This is very exciting. At that time, many princes were unconvinced, especially the eighth prince who was the loudest and most cheerful. Although the third prince was not so arrogant and pointed at Bailey Fengming's nose to provoke him, he still tried hard to poke at Bailey Fengming and was shameless for this. He asked concubine Yu to give him a small start. Every day after everyone went to school, the great scholar who taught would secretly give the third prince some bad advice. Result: after another year passed and the exam was taken again, Bailey Fengming was still at the top of the list. The third prince studied hard for a year, lighting lamps and boiling oil. His hair was almost bald, and he could only climb up to the middle of his penis. As for the eighth prince, the fifth prince thought about it carefully, and it seemed that he had not even passed the exam himself. From then on, whenever there was an exam, Bailey Fengming always ranked first. Sometimes he was not in good health and could not see anyone for a whole semester, but when the exam came, he was ranked first. Later on, the crown prince was established. The fifth prince thought, in fact, at that time, his father probably did not want to establish the heir apparent. After all, concubine Yu was favored at that time, and concubine Yu's party in the court also tried their best to incite the ministers to find various reasons to delay the appointment of the heir apparent. It's a pity that Bailey Fengming was too powerful at that time. Except for martial arts, he ranked first in all scientific examinations. Those loyal and patriotic ministers worked together to recommend Bailey Fengming. Emperor Yongchang was already breathless under the pressure, and because he felt guilty towards Queen Zhengzi, he ignored concubine Yu's obstruction and persuasion and established the crown prince early. The fifth prince recalled the past. I just feel like I'll be in tears if I talk too much. Even the third emperor brother, who is more outstanding among the brothers, is still the second child in front of the emperor brother. As for the eighth emperor brother, even if he grows 8 more heads, he cannot catch up to half of them. It is really a sign of respect for him not to be regarded as mentally retarded by his royal brother. The eighth prince's concubine has a noble status. I'm afraid it's inappropriate for us to comment like this. Although Zhao Yi didn't hear much, she still heard the words eighth prince concubine mentioned by Fan Qinjiao and Bailey Fengming. Fan Qinjiao nodded, it's indeed inappropriate. Bailey Fengming also stopped talking. Instead, he called the waiter over and gave some instructions softly. Unexpectedly, Zhao Yi suddenly stood up and was about to leave. Bai Li Lingyu quickly stopped the person. What's wrong with you? Zhao Yi said with unusual certainty, of course I will go and apologize to the eighth prince. Bell Lingyu. Is this necessary? Even if you mention it, so what? Even the eighth prince was sent away thousands of miles away by his brother. If the eighth prince's concubine dares to have anything, with his wife's urine, she will definitely send you away. You're thousands of miles away times 2. Zhao Yi, no matter what Bailey Lingyu thought, she shook off his hand and walked towards the eighth prince's concubine. Just now, my fourth brother and fourth sister-in-law said something transgressive. I am here to apologize to the eighth prince concubine on behalf of fourth brother and fourth sister-in-law. Zhao Yi walked up to the eighth prince concubine and knelt down on the ground. She really as if he had done something terribly wrong, he did not forget to slap himself twice in the face. Eighth princess. I was so frightened that I stood up right away. Fan Qinjiao didn't expect Zhao Yi to behave like this, but she soon regained her composure. The eighth prince's concubine could not remain calm. She looked in the direction of Fan Kinjao. The surprise and inquiry in her eyes were not too obvious. Why did she call her fourth brother and fourth sister-in-law? Which princess is this? I have never heard that the emperor has an illegitimate daughter among the people. Before Fan Kinjao could speak, Bailey Lingyu walked over and looked at Zhao Yi's red and swollen face. It was fake not to feel distressed, but thinking that this matter had nothing to do with the eighth prince, she suppressed her anger and said, This is a friend I brought back from Subay. I don't know the rules of the main city very well. Please forgive me, Princess Eighth Prince. The eighth prince's concubine had also heard that the fifth prince had brought back a girl from Subay. Now when she heard this again, she still didn't understand. If it's just a misunderstanding, forget it. 5. This young master took the person away, that is. Bai Li Lingyu pulled Zhao Yi up and turned to leave. However, Zhao Yi stood still and looked at the eighth prince's concubine and said, The people's daughter knows that the eighth prince's concubine is a kind-hearted person, but the people's daughter is deeply sorry for what happened today. The people's daughter does not understand the rules of the main city, but in the people's, if you make a mistake with a girl, you have to treat her to a drink and a meal. I wonder if the eighth prince's concubine will be free one day, and the girl is willing to be the host and apologize. The eighth princess almost laughed when she heard this. Fortunately, I held it in. She has always been good-tempered, but that was because she was facing the crown princess. If it were anyone else, she would not be so easy to talk to. After all, she is the crown princess, who would dare to despise her? The eighth prince's concubine is also a fool. Zhao Yi obviously doesn't know the identities of the fifth prince and others, but now he takes the initiative to come to her and say this. Even though it seems fair and above board, its purpose seems a bit too obvious. This is obviously because he wants to step on others and curry favor with her. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 739. Chapter 739. It turns out to be His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. The eighth princess looked at Zhao Yi in front of her and really laughed angrily. Courage is admirable, but also stupid. Fan Kinjao also didn't expect that one day he would be used as a stepping stone. This feeling is really quite subtle. Zhao Yi looked at the eighth princess with longing eyes, and her eyes were a little red with anxiety. Since arriving in the main city, she has been inquiring about her betrothed husband. By chance, she learned that her betrothed husband's father had become a high-ranking official in the court, and who was Bailey Lingyu standing next to her now. He's just a soldier who is not worth mentioning. Zhao Yi knew that if she wanted to meet her engaged husband, she had to find someone with a powerful identity. She has been searching for a betrothed husband for so long, and she doesn't want to miss this opportunity. As long as the eighth prince concubine is willing to accept her apology, she will have a chance to win over the eighth prince concubine. When the time comes, she will use the eighth prince concubine to find the betrothed wife. With the support of the eighth prince concubine, even the father of the betrothed husband will probably have to give her some thin noodles. Bai Li Lingyu didn't understand her daughter's family's thoughts, let alone Zhao Yi's thoughts. In his opinion, it was indeed inappropriate for Zhao Yi to do this, but maybe it was just too simple. After all, she had been like this when he had known her. For a while, the atmosphere was a little awkward. The eighth prince's concubine's natal sisters-in-law have quit. Who is so bold as to chew the eighth prince's concubine's tongue behind her back? Whose children are so uneducated that they dare to gossip about the eighth prince's concubine behind her back? The royal daughter-in-law, how can you cats and dogs have nothing to say to her? Why don't you come over quickly and apologize to the eighth princess? It's just a trivial matter, and it can't be such a big deal. What else can the eighth prince do except persuading several sisters-in-law? Is it really necessary for her to say that she is afraid of being struck by lightning after being apologized by the two giant Buddhas and admitting their mistake? She could never say this. But the more the eighth princess tried to calm things down, the angrier her sisters-in-law became. Their sister-in-law was so polite even as a princess, so how could there still be unruly people who dared to stir up trouble? The more the ladies thought about it, the more they felt that they could not swallow this breath. Seeing Fan Qinjiao and Bailey Fengming sitting there motionless, they got up and were about to go over to argue. When the eighth princess saw that something was not going well, she quickly stepped forward to stop her, but how could she stop her? Bai Lingyu didn't expect things to turn out like this, and her body became tense. Zhao Yi looked at Bai Lingyu, blinking her red eyes innocently, "But I did something wrong, but I just wanted to help the fourth brother and the fourth sister-in-law admit their mistakes to the eighth prince and concubine." Hearing this, the eighth princess was so angry that she almost slapped her. The water has been muddied, but now she looks innocent. She is really a pure, natural, and pollution-free little white lotus. Bailey Lingyu was actually a little angry. After all, the emperor's brother and his sister-in-law hid their identities for him. They didn't want to be misunderstood or even insulted now. But looking at Zhao Yi's pure and innocent face, no matter how old he was, the anger was also extinguished. But Bailey Lingyu couldn't do anything that would cause the emperor's brother and his wife to suffer. With this thought in mind, he touched the waistband in his sleeve. If it doesn't work, you can only reveal your identity. At this moment, the waiter went upstairs carrying a stack of thick steamer baskets. The rich aroma of shrimp dumplings instantly filled the entire second floor. "Sir, here are the 10 drawers of shrimp dumplings you requested. Our shopkeeper has told us that the steamer will be given to you. I hope you will come to support me often in the future." The waiter walked to Bailey Fengming's side and said, "Bend down respectfully." Everyone was stunned when they looked at the shrimp dumplings. Even the ladies who were originally going to find Fan Qinjiao and Bailey Fengming to discuss the matter were stunned. The shrimp dumplings of this restaurant are the most famous in the main city. Each dumpling has a crystal clear shrimp inside. Coupled with the exquisite ingredients, a drawer of dumplings costs 5 taels of silver. 50 taels, that's a month's money for the waiter here. Moreover, the shrimp dumplings here are only available in limited quantities, only 2 drawers per table. But look at Bailey Fengming again, 1 point is 10 drawers, is this crazy? That's a lot of money. Not even the ladies present dared to be so extravagant. Bailey Fengming took the 10 drawers full of steamer baskets and took out a few taels of silver from his sleeves and threw them away. The waiter couldn't close his mouth with joy. Just now, this guest paid 3 times the price for shrimp dumplings, and now he has given several times the silver reward. Such generous guests are rare. The shopkeeper also said that the dishes on the distinguished guest's table are treated as a treat by the shop. Bailey Fengming said, "No need, he will pay for the rest of the dishes." Speaking, he raised his hand and pointed at Bailey Lingyu. "Bell Lingyu. What a dear brother." Bailey Fengming picked up the dumplings, then grabbed Fan Qinjiao's hand again, and then left grandly in full view of everyone. Several ladies. "This is too arrogant. You clearly made a mistake first, but now you are leaving openly. This is taking them personally." Still not paying attention to the eighth prince concubine at all. With these thoughts in mind, the ladies were about to chase Bailey Fengming and Fan Qinjiao. Bailey Fengming happened to be leading Fan Qinjiao downstairs. Just as the ladies turned around, they happened to see Bailey Fengming. Fengming's jade pendant hanging on his waist flashed past their eyes. The sign made of pure gold is engraved with 9 intertwined pythons. Its shape is unique and lifelike. The most important thing is that those pythons have 4 claws. At this time, even if the ladies were ignorant, they were all shocked and broke into cold sweats. There is only one person in Ziliang who can wear the 4 claws and 9 pythons brand. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince today. The 8th prince's concubine, who also saw the sign, finally breathed a sigh of relief and called the sisters-in-law back. It's not a big deal, why should the sisters-in-law be angry? This time, the ladies lost their temper and obediently returned to their seats and sat down. Then they looked at their sister-in-law's calm face from beginning to end. What else could they not figure out? The 4th brother and the 4th sister-in-law made mistakes, and Minu is willing to bear them alone. I also hope that the 8th prince concubine will give Minu a chance to apologize and admit her mistakes. If the 8th prince concubine feels that Minu is not sincere enough, Minu is willing to continue to punish herself. Zhao Yi. With that said, he raised his hand again to slap himself in the face. This time, before the 8th princess could take action again, the other ladies stopped her in their tracks. Although I don't know what the relationship between this girl and the prince is, we can't let her go on like this. Otherwise, when the prince really comes to visit, won't they all follow the same old face? Zhao Yi looked at the changes of the ladies in shock. It was obviously not like this just now. The 8th princess just wanted to go out to have a meal with her sisters-in-law, but she did not expect to encounter such a bad thing. What happened today was just a misunderstanding. This girl does not need to blame herself so much. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 740. Chapter 740. Who is not reserved? Zhao Yi was a little confused as she watched the 8th prince and his entourage leave as soon as they said they were leaving. How did things come to be like this? Yi, let me take you back. Bailey Lingyu was also inexplicably tired, but he still couldn't leave Zhao Yi here alone. Zhao Yi grabbed Bailey Lingyu's sleeve and said pitifully, Lingyu, are you also angry that I am too troublesome? But I thought it was your 4th brother and 4th sister-in-law who helped me. If you think I'm too troublesome, if it's something, I'll just stop doing it from now on. Bailey Lingyu was stunned. Do you regard my 4th brother and sister-in-law as relatives? From Subay to the main city, you have always taken good care of me. I know you treat me well. I don't know how to repay you. I can only treat your relatives as my relatives. If you don't like it, just treat me as my relatives. I must be busy today. Zhao Yi lowered her head and her voice drifted away in the wind. Bailey Lingyu breathed a sigh of relief and blamed herself for overthinking. She quickly smiled and said, it's too late for you to think about me so much, but you don't need to be like this in the future. In fact, my 4th brother and 4th sister-in-law, anyway, those 2 people didn't suffer. You don't have to worry about them at all. Just kidding, who in the main city dares to make the crown prince and crown princess miserable? Even if you really have the courage, you don't have the ability. Zhao Yi nodded, as if she was worried that Bailey Lingyu would be angry. She lowered her head and pulled his sleeves. Belle Lingyu. Being angry has been forgotten for a long time. Fan Qinjiao smiled at each other after he followed Bailey Fengming into the carriage. Fan Qinjiao really didn't expect that the 5th prince would be such a cheerful person, but he liked this kind of woman. However, it was the 5th prince's private matter after all, and she couldn't really interfere in anything. Besides, with Zhao Yi's life experience, even if she had to knowing the identity of the 5th prince and really wanting to marry him, let alone what will happen to the emperor, I guess even the empress will not be able to pass it. The queen is such a fine person, how could she not see what kind of person Zhao Yi is? The aroma of shrimp dumplings filled the car. As Fan Qinjiao thought about it, her eyes fell on Bailey Fengming. Thinking about the war without gunpowder just now, she felt it was funny. I originally thought that people like Bailey Fengming would disdain to argue with women, but I didn't expect that he single-handedly silenced all the women just now. And she didn't know when she had started to get used to the feeling of having him around. Fan Qinjiao had never felt this feeling in her previous life. It was fresh and subtle, but she cherished it especially. Bailey Fengming was also thinking about what was in his heart, but when he came back to his senses, he saw a face with a sweet smile, and the dark eyes were shining, as if someone had sprinkled a handful of broken stars, so beautiful. Why are you smiling so happily? In his memory, she seemed to have never been so happy. Fan Kinjao shook his head and looked at the shrimp dumplings aside. You just gave away so many things last time and you bought so many shrimp dumplings today. Is it really okay? As far as she knew, the prince's monthly salary was not very large. Bailey Fengming laughed dumbly. Oh, he was being questioned. After all, I am also a prince. Besides, my mother's dowry has been secretly given to me a long time ago. Even if I am not the one who sits on that chair in the end, I will support you, it's enough. Fan Kinjao was stunned. After being reborn, she never thought about failure. But I have to say that Bailey Fengming was actually right. Nothing in this world is certain. No matter how confident you are, there is always the possibility of failure. The so-called fallback route is easy to say, but it is extremely difficult to actually implement it. Once it is not Bailey Fengming who sits on that chair, it is not just him and her involved, but also the Hua family, the Zhou family, and the Heshuo County and Prince's Mansion. The roots are intertwined and the branches are numerous. But since Bailey Fengming said this, he should have already started planning. So, after all, he looked one step further than her. Seeing that Fan Qingyuan was silent for a long time, Bailey Fengming thought that he had said something harsh, so he held her hand and said, I'm just making enough preparations, but it may not really be needed. Fan Kinjao suddenly rushed into his arms, listened to his strong heartbeat, and closed his eyes with peace of mind. Bailey Fengming. It's great to have you, Fan Kinjao murmured softly. She knew that he didn't mean to fail, he just thought more and further than she did. He made her feel at ease indescribably, just like as long as he is by her side, she will not panic or be afraid even if the sky falls. The heartbeat in my ears accelerated a little, and it was deafening. Fan Kinjao raised his head in confusion, and happened to see Bailey Fengming frozen in place uncomfortably, with a suspicious blush on his originally white ears. Fan Kinjao was stunned for a moment, and then his shoulders began to shake. She didn't realize that His Royal Highness, who had always been shameless, was actually shy. Bailey Fengming listened to someone snickering, and couldn't bear it anymore, so he threw the person onto the carriage and blocked his mouth. The temperature inside the carriage is constantly soaring, making people feel itchy due to the heat. The difficult initiative almost made Bailey Fengming unable to control himself. Fan Kinjao, who was pressed on the soft couch and kissed in a daze, really never thought about the issue of taking the initiative or not. She also didn't expect that she just expressed her inner thoughts, but ended up causing such a big fuss. Movement. It's better to be more reserved in the future, otherwise, he is really worried that he will not be able to control himself. Bailey Fengming's pleasant voice seemed even more magnetic because of its hoarseness. Looking at the ears that were also red in front of him, he bit into it. It was soft and glutinous. Well, it tasted good. Fan Kinjao. Which one of us is no longer reserved? The slow-moving carriage stopped outside the gate of the western suburbs mansion. Lian 11's voice sounded outside the car door, Your Highness, we're here. Bailey Fengming lowered her head and reluctantly kissed her plump forehead before pulling her up and carefully arranging her clothes. Father is very strict during this period. I'm afraid I'm going to stay in the East Palace for a while, and if anything happens, let Texia come to the palace to deliver a message. Even if you really want to show your indifference to worldly affairs, you can't always drag Fan Kinjao along with you. After all, his marriage to Fan Kinjao was all planned by his father. It would not be a good thing if his father noticed that he was getting too close to Fan Kinjao. Fan Kinjao naturally understands these principles. Be careful yourself too. Now Zhongping from the two cities is also putting pressure on my father. I think my father will take action soon. After all, no emperor wants to lose the support of the people. Fan Kinjao nodded and got out of the carriage under Bailey Fengming's gaze. End of this chapter.